Welcome to the Illuminating Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Marcia Narayan Weldon, and I'm a lawyer, business strategist, corporate trainer, and executive coach. Each week, I'm going to bring you my favorite entrepreneurs, thought leaders, legal professionals, and other coaches who will inspire, educate, and empower you. So I am here today with Patricia Wooster, who is the founder and publisher of Wooster Media, and she's also the CIO of Designing Genius. So I'm super happy to have you here. We've met in a variety of circumstances, but you are like me. You're a multi-passionate and a multi-hyphenate. So we've got a lot to cover in a short period of time, but thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So one of the things that you do is you help people amplify their brands and their messages, whether it's through courses, through speeches, through books, etc. And a lot of my listeners may be lawyers or people in professional services firms. And the whole thought of branding is either a foreign concept to them, or they might think it's unseemly. Like, do they think, do I have to go dance on TikTok to brand my brand? Why would I do that? So what does it mean to brand yourself? And when you deal with people in professional services firms or people who might be a little bit reluctant to put themselves out there, what's some advice you give them? And I'm particularly interested in some non-traditional advice that people may not have heard before. No pressure.
Yeah. So I think the traditional advice is actually really overwhelming. So I'm an introvert, so I don't want to be doing dances and coming up with weird, like it feels unnatural, to be doing a lot of those things. And so I think the first thing is really nailing like who you are and who you're trying to attract. So it's the same thing I tell people when they're writing a book or starting a course, create a course or something like that, is that oftentimes we think as experts. So if we're in a profession and we become the go-to person for something, or everybody says, oh, you're so good at that, we think that's the track we should be on. And for many of us who have grown into our career and stuff, that may not be what we're passionate about anymore, right? Because just because we're good at something doesn't mean that's our passion or purpose. And so then when we have to put ourselves...
Say that again, because so many people don't realize that, like, I'm good at this. I'm a great speaker. I should become a speaker. So
exactly. And it's reinforced, right? It's reinforced from other people. So like for me, I'm really good at organizing and a really good like taskmaster or something. So it's very natural for the people in our company to say, I want you to watch over this project, make sure we hit timelines and those kind of things. But I can't stand watching over people. And when I pass the baton, I want them to take it. But it's very easy for people to say, or even me to grab it and say, well, I am good at it. It's kind of easy for me. And so what happens is we start, then we go out to do our brand. And the reason it feels so uncomfortable, the reason we have resistance around it is because we don't really believe it. Like we're not really in flow over it, right? So the first thing you want to do, and I tell people this also when you're writing a book or any kind of thing, first identify who do you want to attract? Because when you build your thing, you want to build that audience, and oftentimes people are building an audience they already have that keeps them stuck in the thing they're already doing that they no longer want to do. And so when you find out the audience you want to build, because that's who you want to help and serve, it becomes easier to get out in front of people because all you're doing is you're being of service. You're delivering information that's going to help that person. And subconsciously, you believe it. You're not faking it. You're not trying to say, how do I come up with another video or blog post about XYZ that you don't really care about that much anymore. And I notice a significant difference. Like if I go on Instagram story, and right now I'm really into human growth potential, and I put something out there that I'm experimenting on myself, I'm excited to share that versus maybe like book coaching or something that I'm not doing as much anymore. I have to really struggle to think of, okay, what do I share out there? It just doesn't feel natural. And so I think your brand, it's not an art project. It's not about working on Canva to figure out the logos and colors and all that nonsense. It's really about first going deep inside and saying, okay, what do I want the next 5-10 years of my life to look like? Who I want to be serving? What do I want to be talking about and doing? And work backwards from there on what the content is. Then you can get, all the artsy stuff in there.
Right. So you have so many things that we could do 45 minutes just on that question alone. But you mentioned a couple things, flow and getting into flow. People hear about flow state, they hear about it in terms of writing, hear about it in terms of work. What does that mean to you, and how did somebody actually get into flow?
Okay, so we all know, any of us that have heard of flow, it's when you lose track of time, right? And you're doing something that you enjoy. The first thing is really identifying what gets you into flow state. The second thing is what time of day am I most often? So we all have power hours and protective hours. Power hours are those hours that's the easiest to get into work. Some people, it's first thing in the morning. It's when we're supposed to do our number one priority projects. Other people, it's later in the day. And what are the protective hours? What are the hours that I know I'm mentally fatigued? I shouldn't be making decisions, and those kind of things. You don't want to be trying to do it during your protective hour. Those are hours where you do mindless things. So first, understanding when you're most likely to get into flow state. And then second, really getting back to what is my genius that I enjoy. So for somebody writing a book, for most people, it's not going to be writing. Most people are not in love with the idea of writing. So it's getting back
Thank you for saying that. It's like, this is miserable.
That's what all your team is for on the back end of it. You're not supposed to be a genius writer because most of us weren't born to be professional authors, me included. So for me, it's the flow. If I want to get into flow state is work on a piece of the book. And if your book is well outlined, you don't have to, and you're writing nonfiction, you don't have to go from chapter 1 to chapter, the last chapter. You can dodge in and out. Find a topic that you're particularly interested in and talking about in that moment. Could be telling a story, and maybe every chapter opens with a story. It could be research, whatever is exciting to you in that moment, and work on that. That's the quickest way to get into flow state as far as writing a book, because you've already kind of chosen what that project is. It's easier to get into flow state when you're not focused on, like, say, writing a book, and where you can just look at your calendar, because then you can just pick those things that, you're naturally drawn to.
Can you ever be in flow state for too long? Because we talked about it, you get distracted of time. Can some people use, I'm in flow, don't disturb me, and then they don't get anything else done? And how do you know when you stop the flow? Or do you?
Well, so I think a lot of people get into flow state on their hobbies. And I think also, this is not going to be a popular thing to say, but a lot of people who start their own business as like a solopreneur, their side hustle, or whatever you want to call that, the reason they're not successful in business is because they only stay in the flow state. They only stay in the stuff that they love, and they never get to the nitty gritty that will actually drive the business. So yes, I think you can get, because, if I play tennis or do something fun, I can get into flow state and I can do it until my energy runs out. Should I on a Monday? Probably not, But yeah, I think it works. I think you see a lot of those people online who claim year after year the business doesn't grow is they're spending time only in the things that they like.
Right. So you have to have some kind of balance. Now, you talked a little bit about writing books. You have written 16 books. God bless you. Right. And so some people here might say, I can't even write 16 blog posts. I can't even write a LinkedIn post. How do you get started, and how do you stay motivated when it comes to writing? And what are some mistakes? Because some people here, I'm going to talk about writing books and chapters in a minute, but some people listening might say, I don't want to write a book, but I want to get myself out there for branding. You've now convinced me, Patricia, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to be more consistent on some, longer form content, whether it's a blog, whether it's a newsletter, whether it's, a substantive LinkedIn post. How do you get the people to get started, and how do you get motivated?
So I
keep
think
motivated.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of business people, we understand the concept of strategy and planning, that it's necessary to get where we've gotten. We've used strategy in different areas, and we've also used planning. And so for me, I think it's the same way I approach one of our businesses, we work with individual entrepreneurs, and we do things in series, in chunks. It's the same thing with a book, right? And so if you can outline, say, pick a theme for the month, and it could be, you don't even have to share it with the public, but for the theme for, say February, I'm going to discuss how we can use whatever I'm teaching just in relationships. I'm going to talk about your business relationships one week. I'm going to speak about marriage relationships. You don't even have to share that with the public, but in your head for your planning, have an area of focus for a period of time so that when you sit down to do it, you're not staring at just a blank page. And now with AI, it's amazing, right? So you can go into Chat GPT and you can say, find me 3 research papers on law for business relationships. They'll pull 3 white papers. That should give you some ideas. And then you just say, give me a summary of these 3 things. That gives you a summary. Now, out of that summary, you've got topic ideas that you can say, okay, this is interesting to me. That's what I'm going to write about. And so there's tools out there. So I think for many people, it's that blank page moment. But if we know the topic, the trick I use is I pick a theme. I know my topic for the week. I review a few notes about that topic. Like maybe I pulled a summary from ChatGPT or maybe some other content I've created. I read it. I go exercise and do my stuff in the morning. And for some reason, by the time I hit the shower, it's writing itself in my head, And so I always tell people, put some prompts, put them in your phone, right? Put them in the notes or whatever you're going to be working on. And subconsciously, your brain will start writing those articles or creating that content because you just can't get it out of your mind then.
So you mentioned ChatGPT, and as we're filming this, it's end of April. So right now we're at ChatGPT 4. By the time this comes out, we could be at ChatGPT 110. Who knows? How do you use AI in your work, other than what you've just said? And for people who are creative or who are knowledge workers, should they be worried? I know you're talking about using it to supplement or implement, but as of the time we're recording, there's some mass hysteria. Although I use ChatGPT 4 all day, every day now. I found so many ways that it helps for just like what you said, for just summarizing things. Obviously, you have to know what's right and what's not right. So if you just try to do it to get your research and make that only your research, you can be in trouble. But how are you using it? And what are you advising clients? Because you work with a lot of entrepreneurs, businesses. What are you advising them in terms of the use of generative AI?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first premise, and, a lot of people are worried about the ChatGPT thing. And a lot of people I know who are in the copywriting space or content creation space, but junk in is junk out. It's always been that way. So we see blogs that you go to and you can tell that if a bot didn't write it, then somebody that knows nothing about the topic wrote it. They probably sent it overseas. They're underpaying somebody to write generic content just to fill a website. Well, that's the same thing you're going to get if you use ChatGPT and you're trying to say, write an article about, how to do a morning exercise routine. You're going to get something very generic. The genius of using ChatGPT is to layer it in with what you're already doing. And so like I can cut and paste something I wrote 6 months ago or something from a book that I wrote, a chapter, and say, summarize this into a blog post or create 10 questions based on this content, turn this into a workbook, write this at a 5th grade level. Like take what you already have and are doing it and use the AI to layer things in, find the research for you. The other thing it's great for is you can upload anything and say, create an SEO rich title for it. And they're excellent. You can say, create 5 Instagram posts. They'll write all the captions and come up with all the amazing hashtags that most of us don't know about. So use it as a time saver and as an enhancer. The people that should feel threatened are the people right now. Now it's going to evolve and it will threaten definitely legitimate jobs. But where I think it's really going to threaten are going to be some of those overseas workers that were not charging enough to begin with for their services, where English maybe is a second or third language for them. And they were already struggling to write generic content. ChatGPT is going to eliminate that worker. But for most people, what they need to do is just upskill and become really, really good at AI prompting. because AI prompting is also
absolutely.
a skill, you know?
Yep.
It's absolutely.
And I actually read in the paper that I was reading the paper yesterday about, Goldman Sachs says 300 million jobs could be eliminated, but really it's a matter of just upskilling, like you said, and that you're now seeing job descriptions that are looking at just how competent you are in AI and how competent you are. And I took a training last week about writing prompts, and there's just a whole new era out there. So let's switch gears a little bit. We first met in the context of your putting together some anthologies. I've always wanted to write a book, but I'm too lazy to write a book. I'm like, I have so much to say, but I don't feel like actually doing it myself. So
Yeah.
and I don't know if I want to get a ghostwriter because I'm a control freak. So what am I going to do? I said, I'm never going to do it. And then something came about where you had these anthologies. So I've been a part of two of them. One is called To Speak, Lead, and Impact. And the other one hasn't come out yet. As of the time of recording, launch date is in a couple of weeks, Becoming You. But tell me about the process of getting people together to write. And for the people who think they may want to write, but want to start small, why is doing something like getting into an anthology a good idea? And what's that process like?
Well, first of all, and I can't talk about anthologies without prefacing this. 95%, I'm making this number up, but this is how strongly I feel about it.
Appreciate the disclaimer.
All right. There's no research behind this. Of anthologies are junk. So what they are is they are a bunch of entrepreneurs or people paying money basically to get bestseller status only. So if you a key indicator of this is if you're evaluating an anthology to participate in, order the last one that was done, and you'll notice quality right there, but then go look up each one of those authors and see if any of them are promoting that book on their website anymore after that 1 week. They will not. They will not. That book will not show up anywhere. The only thing that's going to show up is on LinkedIn. It's going to say best-selling author next to their name, and they probably won't even name the book. They're buying a status, and that's fine. Some people do that because they're writing their own book and they want to launch it as a best-selling author. But if you really want to have that experience of sharing your expertise, learning the right way to write something, learning the right way to launch it, seeing what the editing, the packaging, the entire process looks like. If you really want that and you want something that can be sold at Barnes & Noble and that you're going to hold up 2 years from now and claim it, you want to find a book that, one, has criteria of who participates. You want you don't want to be the most amazing, important, accomplished person in the room. Right. Because then it's hard to learn. And you want to make sure that the people organizing it are candid about the process. So if you have questions during the process, because you also want to really use it as a learning experience, even if you never publish your own book, it helps with, like you said, blog posting, creating digital courses. With the books you participated in, there's a speaking element to it, right? So you can even launch your speaking career from it. All of those kind of things are really, really important. And you want to make sure that, this is something that you can be proud of. Most of these anthologies, the second you sign up, they send you a sheet and says, here's what I need from you. Here's the date that you never hear from them again. You submit your manuscript, and the next time you see it's in the published book. You don't meet the other authors and those kind of things. And so I encourage people, if you're an anthology where the organizers, like we do, and there's other people that do it too, but where they get you on the calls and you're in some kind of chat group together, part of that experience is leveraging the relationships of the other people participating in that book. Get on their podcast, get to know them, do some collab type stuff, see where there's synergy so that you can grow your network in the process as well.
And that's why so many of the people that my listeners will hear from are going to be members of the two books, because their stories are so rich. And we talk about the speaking element, right? I know public speaking is a huge fear for many people. It's not a fear for me, but it's a fear for a lot of people. But when you're telling your own story, just that passion that comes out, and you're right, you have to write about something you're passionate about. If you just do as a check the box exercise so you can have a best-selling author on your LinkedIn profile, that's not really helpful. And I know the ones that we've worked on together, we have, we're doing, meetings, we're doing podcasts with each other, we're promoting each other, which is another thing, right? If you're going to be in part of an anthology, you really want to do something where you not only give, but you get something out of it as well. Now, you've got another
Absolutely.
book, Designing Genius, and I'm excited about this. And, so there you go. You've got it up there, right? And people may have heard of design thinking for products or those kinds of things. And I actually teach a design thinking class at the University of Miami for the undergrads, which is itself interesting. And it's amazing when you start to think differently about things and you break down the paradigms that are already there, how much you can accomplish. So who is designing genius for, and what does that even mean? Is this your zone of genius? Is there a different definition of genius? Walk us through that.
So, first of all, this book actually came about it was a relationship I met on Clubhouse. So, I connected with somebody named Amelia Antonetti. She is one of the top human behaviorists in the world. So, she's worked with Steve Harvey, Oprah Winfrey, Fortune 500. This has been her entire career. So when we partnered, it was actually initially to help get her IP out into the world. Now, we ended up building an entire business around it because my background is all psychology, business, personal development. I've worked with people, but it's what I've studied and read. And so we combined these things. But what Designing Genius is for each individual to go inward and realize success comes from within, and to do the internal work to identify what areas of their life are most important to them, what within those areas of life, say, your business or wealth generation or whatever, what to you means success in that area, because what means success to me in business is different than what means success to you, right? What do you like? And then how do we amplify those things? How do we create movement consistently in those areas of life to get, to our highest human potential, so that then we can go back around and create a new series of kind of goals that we can make movement towards. And so that's kind of the premise of using human behavior, which works instantly, versus, and I'm not saying don't go to therapy, but versus going to a therapist or going to your personal trainer or doing these different things where it takes time. It's using these human behavior tricks that gets you kind of moving within those areas of things that we say we want, but a lot of times we don't do anything about.
So give us an example. Of course, we're going to put the link to the book in the show notes, so everybody will order it, obviously. But before they get it, what are a couple of the tips that you think, you said that can work instantly, because everyone likes instant. And what are people doing wrong when it comes to motivation, reaching their goals, even figuring out what they want to be when they grow up?
Oh my gosh, I could take this in so many directions. So one of the things, and you and I have talked about, is AWA, which that is awareness, willingness, and action. So first you become aware of something, and then you have to decide, and there's no wrong or right answer, am I willing or unwilling to make a change in this area? If I'm willing, I need to take action. If I'm not willing, I can either say never or just not now. We can't work on everything at one time. So I'll give you a funny example. So last week, I went to a personal trainer who I haven't seen for 12 years. And she did all these measurements and all this stuff. And she told me I was skinny fat. So, and I actually shared this in a community group, and they were like, oh my God, how'd you react? And I said, well, now I become aware. And this is like body measurements. This wasn't, she just looked at me. I mean, it was the facts, right? I'm aware. So then am I willing or not willing to do the work to change that ratio? Knowing I have to change my diet, I have to change my movement, I'm going to have to change my morning routine and all those things. For me, I'm willing to do that right now. I have the time in my schedule. It's a priority. So now I'm taking action. I'm making myself accountable. And so I think a lot of the times we meet action with action. We don't take that time to ask ourselves if we're willing or not. If we get, say, if we get in an argument with somebody, right? Or we get upset with our kids about something, right? And it used to be like I'd get upset with my kid and I would immediately react. Instead of saying,
I've never done that, so I wouldn't know what that's like at all.
I'm sure I'm the only one that's done that. But what I had to realize was I became aware that the way I was handling it was not working. He kept doing what I didn't want him to do, right? And so I became aware that it wasn't working. So I had to say, am I willing to handle this a different way? Am I willing to see where he's at on his side and try to get a different reaction, right? And so often we just react, and that's a lot of times that doesn't really work. And that's just an example of how human behavior can work instantly. Right. It's just stopping and pausing and putting yourself through like kind of a series of questions to yourself before you take action.
Excellent. So you've got AWA, and I think that's a great way to kind of a framework to put into place. Now, you also have on your website an audit. Tell us about this audit, and we're going to put the link so that people can do this audit. I started looking at it, I was like, wow, I really hadn't thought about some of these things in this way. What are we auditing? Why do we do it? And then what do we do with those results?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now I have 3 businesses. Okay. So we talked about the writing business just to kind of make this clear for the listeners a little bit. And then Designing Genius is actually 2 businesses. So Designing Genius, we have a B2B that works with corporations. And then what you're talking about is something that we just did in our B2C group. And what that is, and that has a lot of entrepreneurs and there's even couples in there and stuff. And they're going through this process we just talked about in the book, which is identifying their areas of focus and creating movement. And so last month, our focus in March, because it was the end of Q1, the first part of the year, was to do an audit on your goals. And so by goals, I mean, it could be your New Year's resolution list. It could be your bucket list goals, however you define it, right? But by now, by March, most people have forgotten what's even on their New Year's list. I mean, they may remember 5 of them, but there's probably 10 that they don't even remember they put there, right? A lot of that stuff's just kind of fallen by the wayside. And so the first thing we want to do is really audit it and go through that list. Now we don't do New Year's resolutions. It's like in our program, we call it areas of focus. So they have to go back through those and make the decision. Am I going to stop this thing? If I haven't started it, am I willing to start it? Am I going to swap it for something else? Because maybe I don't like it, or I'm going to continue the way I'm doing it. So for example,
let's say stop,
swap,
continue.
Swap. Right. So say, for example, you decide you want to get into shape, but you probably, most of us put like workout or exercise on our list, right? And so maybe you went to you joined a cycle place and you're doing cycling and you hate cycling. Instead of just quitting cycling and just saying, I hate cycling, or keep doing something you hate, you could just swap that, which is totally fine, and say, I'm going to do Pilates. Or it could be, you know what, I'm having some health challenges right now, problems with my gut or whatever. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the exercise for now, just for now. And instead, I am going to focus on my nutrition. And so the premise behind this is it's not pass fail. And that was so oftentimes we set goals, we set resolutions, and it's pass or fail. Did I lose 30 pounds? Did I not lose 30 pounds? Oh, I'm a failure. I didn't do it. Or yay, I did it. Right. Mm-hmm. And instead, it's incremental movement. If you just did it 30% of the time, that's 30% more than you did it the month before. And so that's a celebration. But maybe if you wanted to get it to 50, you may need to do it slightly differently to be able to do it. And so doing that audit so that you can course correct in the beginning of the year instead of letting 12 months go by and, it's a disaster.
Right. So in Designing Genius, you have this 3 self-identified behavior tools: the area of focus, which I feel like you've just mentioned. If you want to elaborate on that more, you can. The ingredients and the should and should nots. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll just kind of show how they go together. So
sure.
We can only focus in so many areas at once, right? And so for us, we have people create 5 areas of focus. There's only one that's required, and that's self. We must take care of ourselves first. So that's where you would find the ingredients, which might be morning routine, healthy eating, snuggles with my dog, playing tennis, all the things that make you the best you. And it's whether you're doing it now or not. It's just that if I'm doing these things, these make me at my highest and best self. right? And so then you pick other areas of focus that you want to focus on. It could be your relationship with your partner. Maybe you just became an empty nester and you have to shift how that relationship looks. Maybe it's your kids or adventure. Maybe you want some adventure in your life, business, wealth generation. So anything where you want to create that list of what would my best work look like? What would my best job look like? Or wealth generation, what does that look like? Maybe it's having 6 months savings in the bank or learning about how to invest in real estate. What do I want to be doing? Those become the goals. Your should and should nots, you kind of think of them as boundaries. What I should be doing this or I should not be doing this. Like I should not be eating after 9 p.m. Say that's tied to health. But it could also be like at work, I should not be chasing information, right? Or I should not say yes to every request, right? So it's creating those boundaries. But what's different about it is oftentimes boundaries is so like, it feels so aggressive, right? Yes. You know, like if you go to a therapy, you read
about that. We've got to set my boundaries. You're crossing my boundaries. So boundaries has become a big buzzword, but it has its uses.
But the way oftentimes, and this is the same thing, it's handling it different. A lot of times what happens is we get into a contentious situation somewhere. We decide to set boundaries out of nowhere, right? And then we call somebody and say, I've got this new boundary. And it's very like attack, you know, the other person, even if the boundary is perfectly reasonable, is all of a sudden kind of in the defensive. And so the way we approach that is just say, hey, I'm doing some work on myself. I've identified kind of what it requires for me to be at my highest and best self. One of the things that is at my highest and best self is that if somebody needs me somewhere, is that I'm not chasing that information because it frustrates me. And sharing a few, but say, I would also love to hear what makes you at your highest and best self too, is always starting that conversation saying, it's not just about what I want. I really want to know what you want or need, you know? And then it's also, it removes that whole thing of saying, I'm cutting you out of my life or whatever. We don't do that. We just say, if you want to participate in this area of my life, here's what I need. And then they choose. The right people will stick around. The wrong people will remove themselves because they'll be like, absolutely. Oh, wait, I love calling them at 10 p.m. and dumping my drama on them. If they're not going to answer the phone anymore, like I'm going to find somebody else to call.
I'll find a new victim, right?
Right. Exactly.
Right. Now, you've mentioned morning quite a bit. And does everybody really need a morning routine? Now, I'm up between 5 and 5:30 regardless, not by choice. It just happens. So I have now developed a morning routine. And if I don't do it, it actually really sets me off for the rest of the day in the wrong direction. Does everybody need a morning routine? Do you have one? Or is there some other non-negotiable that no matter how tired you are going to do it, whether it's at night or in the morning?
Well, everyone should have a morning routine. My husband has the best morning routine. The rest, he's actually one of my business partners. We are all trying to acquire his morning routine, but everyone really should, because it used to be when I first started working, the mentality was your alarm clock went off. It became a 4-alarm fire. It was like, get dressed, get the kids, pack the lunch, get in the car, race, sit in traffic. And you came into work in chaos. And whether you physically had to leave and go somewhere or you were working from home, the whole day starts and you're starting your kids in chaos too, which is even worse. So the idea of a morning routine is to set yourself up success for the day, mentally and physically. Now, a morning routine can start out as a 15-minute thing. It could be setting your alarm, you wake up, drink some water, maybe you do some journaling and some meditation, or maybe you just get up and do some jumping jacks. But it's time that is reserved for you alone. Now, because our company is kind of based around all of this stuff on the Design Genius side, our morning routines are a lot longer. So, they're like 90 minutes to 2 hours long. But it's including your full workout routine, healthy breakfast, meditation. I wake up and do reading in personal development and some journaling. But it's more about picking and choosing those things that will help you out. And you can start it the night before by ending your evening with gratitude, setting your intention for the next day, so that when you wake up, you're kind of set up, you're not set up into chaos, you know? And it's really, if you think about it, it's really removing all the external distractions and not letting those things be the first thing you wake up to.
Right.
Whether it's work emails, kids screaming, you know, running off to get ready, any of those kind of things.
So speaking of work emails, are you one of those people that doesn't touch your phone for an hour before you get up? Or you can be honest here, because I've now started to focus on that I don't pick up my phone unless it's to listen to an audiobook or a meditation that or something that relates to personal development. That's the only thing that I start my morning off with. I don't look at emails for quite some time. I may look at my calendar just to make sure, oh, forgot I have a 7 o'clock. But other than that, I really make a point not to. But that's very difficult. I imagine that's very difficult for a lot of the people who are going to be listening, who are the high achievers. A fire could have happened. I'm indispensable. I need to take care of this right away. So are you one of those people who doesn't look at the emails, or who has certain times of the day that you'll only look at emails?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'll tell you, like, I have 3 businesses, and 2 of them, like, we have investors. I mean, it is like be busy. We're getting ready to do a cap raise. I mean, we are aggressively super busy right now.
Right.
And I found myself waking up and looking at emails and texts, and it was making me very anxious, very, very anxious. So I do not do that. What I do is, so I've gone so far in the other direction. My phone is on do not disturb 24/7, set on do not disturb. Wow. I have put my business partner, Amelia, my husband, who's my husband, and my other business partner, my kids, my parents, my husband's parents, and maybe 1 or 2 friends or like the kids' school on my favorites. They are the only people that can get through that do not disturb, where I might get a buzz or a ding at any time during the day. Nobody else who texts me, they will just sit there. And that's absolutely fine. And so I will get up and I may check the weather, and because I'm going to be outside working out or something. And like you, I'll at some point in the first hour, I usually check my calendar just to remind myself if I need to be ready at a certain time. But other than that, I really try to check my email maybe 3 or 4 times throughout the day, once at the end of the day. My texts I do check pretty often because most of them are work, but I handle them all at one time. And, you know, I see my kids are like, you know, if I take my phone away from my 16-year-old and I put it in my room, it's like, because it's like constantly something's buzzing, dinging, you know, there's something happening. And I'm like, how do you live like this? Right.
But there's that dopamine rush that people, you know, not just of your kids' generation, my generation too, right? I'm in my mid-50s. I have some people that cannot go to the bathroom without their phone. And I see a lot of people, more people are doing the do not disturb 24 hours a day. I'm thinking, how busy are they? But they're probably really productive. And it's something I think I'm going to adopt as well.
I am obsessed with it. I love it because you can still check it whenever you need, and you can put business people on your favorite. If you're waiting for a big client to call you or something, just move them to a favorite for the next, you know, week or whatever until that thing takes place. But most of it now, it's like as soon as we shut off our home phone service, so much we've got so many spam and junk. I never even see that stuff because if that comes through, there's no number. I don't hear it. If they either leave a message or don't leave a message, but that's just one less call that I even had to think about or had to disturb me. So,
and I love the idea of only checking emails a few times a day. Now, again, some of my lawyer listeners would be like, that's impossible, but it's not impossible. And again, you can be, and if something is really urgent, people should pick up a phone and call you. There's a lost art of using the telephone, which I think people are just like, don't know how to do because they'd have to have a back and forth conversation. But that's something I've actually seen some footers on some people's emails that I check email 3 times a day. If something is urgent, please call me. And there's something to be said because that also goes to the boundaries. It also goes to being able to be in flow because, you know, the science is very clear. Multitasking works for only so much, but really you need to be able to have a singular focus. And if you, as a person with 3 businesses, I'm a person with 8 email addresses, if we can cut down the emails, then I know other people can do it too. So now I'm going to
Well, and
ask you a question.
emails, the other thing is, remember, emails are other people's agendas. When they send you an
Yes.
email, it's their agenda. So you're handling their agenda. And I found that when I was in and out of my emails all day long, at the end of the day, I'd be like, what did I really accomplish? Oh, I helped everyone else get their to-do list done, is what I did.
Wow.
So that's,
That's a great perspective.
yeah,
That's really
because
helpful. Because
people
not
will
only,
complete something and they toss it to you usually at 4:30 on Friday because they're completing their stuff, and they toss it and throw it all into your inbox. And it's like, okay, now it's yours. But it's so easy to go in and just address 10 things at once than one-on-one all day long.
because it's their priority and their timing, which may not be your priority or your timing. So that's an excellent point. Another reason to think about batching your time and what you do things. Now, you've written 16 books. What is a book that you have read, or maybe it's a song or a movie or a mantra that really inspired you that you can share with the listeners that may be able to inspire them?
Yeah, so the books that I'm really excited about right now, and I pre-ordered his new one. I can't remember what it's called, but his name's Benjamin Hardy, and he writes books about your future self. How do you start thinking about what you want for your future and your future self to be? But what I love about Benjamin Hardy is that, and his next book comes out in May, but what I love about him is that he does all the research for you. So he takes all the personal development people that are talk about grit and resilience and business and stuff, and he puts it all into his book. So if you're not somebody, I read a ton, but if you're not somebody that reads a ton, he kind of puts it all together. The other person is Steve Kotler, who has the Flow, Institute. And he's got a book right now about when he turned 53 and his obsession is skiing, how he used all those performance things that he's researched and talked about for years to optimize himself at that age to start doing this kind of freestyle skiing that usually kids do. And he becomes a human experiment. And so that book is really good as well.
So we will find those 2 books and link them in the show notes, as of course all of the books, well, not maybe not all the books, but most of the books that you have written, and especially Designing Genius. So how can people work with you if they wanted to learn more about either working with you individually, whether it's from writing a book or coaching on business or using the Designing Genius for their businesses?
Yeah. So right now we are Design Geniuses in 27 accredited colleges. And so if you're a student, you can find it, through the college, but also just going to designgenius.com. We have a really thriving community over there. We also have on the B2B side we have a software solution that helps with people or companies that are trying to include the People First initiative into their company and connect to the value drivers of their individual employees. So we have that, but that's all in Design Genius. And then if you're interested in writing a book, and I work with usually experts and leaders who want to sort of get their intellectual property out there, they can find that on woostermediabooks.com or even just my name, patriciawooster.com.
And I can attest that working with Patricia is very easy. I don't know how you do it working with 18 or 20 authors. I imagine it must be like herding cats. But from the author, having worked on 2 books with you, it is super easy, at least from my perspective. Now, what's one takeaway as we close out that you really want people to know? If they remember nothing else from this conversation, but one thing from you, what would you want it to be?
So it's interesting as I get older, things change. But I think, something that stuck with me when I really first started writing books back in 2016 was all these personal development books, and your audience, I'm sure, reads a lot of these types of books, was that thought in my head of, gosh, if I would have only known this when I was younger, right? It would have really changed the trajectory of what I thought was possible for my life. The 10,000 hours with Malcolm, Gladwell, that changed my thinking entirely, because we grow up and you're said, you're so good at this, or that's not your thing. I was always told sports weren't my thing and those kind of things. And so we start limiting ourselves at such an early age.
Yes.
Is that if you can start, if you're a parent or you work with youth, if you could start taking these principles and these life skills that are no longer being given to kids and start giving that information and sharing it with your kids, I'm telling you, my kids, and we didn't start out this way, but my kids as teenagers starting to learn about these types of things and the choices they have has been a real game changer in our relationship and their relationship with what they're going to do next. And so whenever you read a good book, a good personal development, or hear a good tidbit, is trying to put it in their language and having a dinner talk around it will really change the perspective and open up a whole new world to your kids. So that's what's most
great.
important to me now.
Because especially since people are trying to get more into whether it's mindfulness or self-care in a way that's beyond the bubble bath, but really thinking through these things. What you're learning, share it with your kids. If you're learning and you're trying to learn how to meditate or be mindful, even for 5 minutes, do that with your kids. Because I cannot imagine what our kids would be like if people learned how to respond versus react and learn some of the tools that we're learning, but we keep for ourselves as adults, but we aren't starting it very, very early on. So, Patricia, it has been a real joy to talk to you. And I know that our listeners have learned a lot. I'm going to put links to everything that Patricia talked about in the show notes so that you can reach out to her. And thanks again, and stay tuned for our next episode. Take care, Patricia.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode. If you like what you heard, subscribe and share it with others.